Physical video games are pretty awesome, right? You walk into your local GameStop, witness literal gang violence break out over a pack of Pokemon cards, and say, "That was weird, one copy of Sonic Racing Crossworlds, please." I wish I was joking. But disregarding that, there's a lot to love about physical games. You can stare lovingly at the box art, you can admire the way it sits on your shelf, but most importantly, you put it in the console and it just works.
Game keycards don't contain any game data.
It's true that the current state of physical video games isn't perfect, which is a shame. PlayStation and Xbox are pushing their all-digital consoles, Nintendo's introducing game keycards, etc. But let's put a pin in that. As with all things, I first want to get into a bit of the psychology here and figure out why it is that I and so many other people love physical games. Because yes, there are plenty of issues with the way they're currently treated, but I think in order to fully understand that, we need to take a step back and understand why we care so much in the first place. So this video is going to be split into two parts, starting with So for starters, I'm a little biased, obviously. But I think for the sake of this video, that's actually better because we're trying to figure out why I'm biased. But also, I'm a normal human being who's capable of understanding other people's opinions. And I've got research studies that I've looked into that I'm not gonna bore you with, but they'll be in the description if you wanna read them. And don't take anything I say as fact, it's all just a theory, alright? A theory based off the research I just talked about. I'm like the Matt Pat of video games, yup. Alright, first let's talk about nostalgia. That sounds kinda hand-wavy and vague, I know, but I think it's actually one of the most important aspects for two different reasons. First of all, the actual experience of going to the store and buying the game, that holds memories in and of itself. Let's step into my shoes for a second here and go back 12 years. I'm 7 years old, I walk into GameStop with my mom and I pick up Pokemon Y for the 3DS on the day it launched. That is a memory I'm never gonna forget, man. There was something so special about picking out this game, going to the counter, and then getting back in the car and immediately putting it in the system and playing on the way home. I remember annoying my brother a lot on the car ride home because I was just really excited about picking Fennekin. I don't know if that's an unpopular opinion, but I like it. Now 12 years later, there's a direct sequel to that game, Pokemon Legends ZA. And once again, I can go to the store and buy myself a physical copy the same way I did back then. I think that's pretty special. But now for the second and probably more important facet of nostalgia, and that's the game itself and the memories that it holds. This is my copy of Pokemon White 2, my first ever Pokemon game. Or at least it's the case. I don't actually have the game anymore. But I did find this case while rummaging through my closet trying to clear some stuff out a few months ago, and when I stumbled across this, it honestly made me tear up a little bit. I think it's human nature to be materialistic, right? People have family heirlooms, they have items that they hold on to for no other reason than sentimental value, and video games are no different. I hold this case in my hand and it just brings back so many memories of playing this game, and even what my life was like at the time. I remember my sister berating me for bringing the game to school when our mom said I wasn't allowed to. I remember an older kid on the bus helping me catch the Reggies. I remember how I got absolutely demolished by the final gym leader Marlin, only to come back the next day and decimate him. Free recall is something incredibly difficult to do. Without proper stimulus for the memories to resurface, it's not likely that they will. But being able to look at this case is a catalyst for those memories to come back, and there's plenty of research to show a connection between emotion and physical objects. And that brings us into tangibility and aesthetics. I'm a firm believer that video games are an art form, which shouldn't be up for debate, but there are some people who would still argue about it, and if that's you, just leave right now. Hit the subscribe button on your way out though. And when I say they're an art form, that isn't just contained to the games themselves. Obviously, that's the big thing, right? That's what really matters. But having extra little details outside of the game can really help elevate things to the next level. First of all, it's just nice to look at the artwork, which I feel like that sounds kind of stupid to say, but like, it shouldn't be, because we've heard of museums, right? Furthermore, let's talk about disc art. A lot of the time, it's pretty unremarkable. But there are also plenty of examples of really cool things being done with discs that are just genius. Look at this disc art for Silent Hill 2 Remake. I'm not going to explain what this means for those who haven't played the game, but it's a direct reference to something that happens in the game that takes advantage of the fact that there's a hole in the center of the disc. Unfortunately, we did not get this disc art in North America for some reason. And of course, when talking about the things you find inside the case, we have to mention instruction manuals. One of my favorite items in my collection is, well, kind of underwhelming, honestly, but it's the instruction manual for Pikmin 1 on the GameCube. It's not that special, but it's cute. You have a little synopsis of the story, you have all of this cute Pikmin artwork that I haven't seen anywhere else but here, and you have this little size comparison between the Pikmin and Olimar and the GameCube disc and the controller and the memory card. Like, they didn't have to do that, but they did, and I respect it a lot. It's really, really cute. Now, I said this was pretty underwhelming, but I think that actually speaks volumes about the current state of physical games, because manuals kinda don't exist anymore. In fact, they were one of the first things to go when gaming started shifting towards digital, and that's sad. It's not like a huge deal, but it was always really easy to tell when someone was passionate about their product based off of how cool the instruction booklet was. Alright, now that's pretty much all of the deep psychological stuff here, because the rest of it just comes down to practicality, or what you perceive as practicality, I guess. No, it still sounds psychological, doesn't it? This being things like being able to sell your games or lend them to people, being able to put the game in the console and not have to worry about spending time downloading it, and so on. These are incredibly important aspects that many people are passionate about. I just say this for last because I think the love for physical gaming starts at a much deeper level. And of course, different people would define practicality differently. To one person, it's putting a physical disc in a console and trusting that it just works, and to another, it's being able to download the game at a moment's notice from the comfort of their own couch and just being able to play it whenever they want. These seem like complete opposites, but depending on who you are, that's the kind of thing that might decide whether you prefer physical or digital. They're both valid. But in terms of longevity, that's where things get a bit divisive. You may be saying to yourself that one of the biggest reasons you prefer physical games is because you don't feel like you own your games when you purchase them digitally. You're worried about them being potentially taken away from you at some point, or not being able to buy a game to begin with if you come along later and the stores are now shut down, particularly if a game is only available digitally. Take for instance, Ace Attorney, Dual Destinies, and Spirit of Justice on the 3DS. These two games were only released on the 3DS eShop outside of Japan, never given physical versions, and now there's no way to buy those games on their own for the 3DS, at least outside of Japan. Thankfully, they've been re-released through Capcom's collections, which I'm a big fan of. They've done so many collections for so many of their beloved franchises, and I think they are the single biggest proponent of carrying their legacy forward to new generations. Oh, would you look at that? This turned into a conversation about preservation. Who would have seen that coming? Preservation in the typical sense is not one of the most important aspects of physical games to me. By all means, I think publishers should do everything they can to bring their old games to modern consoles so everyone can play them, but by and large, it's always going to pale in comparison to emulation. Because not every company is like Capcom. Unfortunately, a lot of companies don't bring over a lot of their games that would make them a ton of money. Physical games can have a role in preservation, but I see it more so as preservation for the self rather than the whole. You're ensuring that you yourself will always have a copy of this game that will reliably work, barring something like disk rot happening, but that doesn't really benefit anyone other than you, which is why emulation is key. That's not where preservation ends though, which I think many people fail to understand. Keeping the case, the disc, the manual, and any other goodies intact is itself a form of preservation. And I think what matters when focusing on preserving physical games is that nothing gets discounted. As we enter part 2 of this video, I think you can finally understand where I'm coming from here. The issues with the physical video game industry, to me, don't represent a loss of video game preservation. Preserving the ones and zeros is the easy part. No, what this really represents to me is a critical blow to a huge part of video game culture that was built up for decades, the culture that so many of us have grown up with and infused into our own identities. So first of all, let's talk about the PS5 and Xbox Series consoles. You are probably well aware that both of these consoles have a digital-only version, which on the surface is fine because they're still selling physical disc drive versions as well. They're just offering a cheaper version of the same product for people who don't care about physical games, and I think that's good. In an ideal world, these two things should coexist. People should have the right of choice. They should be able to play games in whatever way they see fit. If I walk into the Texas Roadhouse and there's only one thing on the menu, that's a little problematic. So what's the big deal? They gave you choice, like you said. Yeah, but it always left me feeling a bit uneasy, the fact that there was a digital version to begin with, because there was a part of me deep down that just had to wonder, what if this is representative of a shift towards something more? Then, last year, the PS5 Pro released, a console that is only digital and you have to separately buy a disc drive attachment for physical games. This console is $750 without the disc drive. I'm just concerned about this because it's clear that Sony wanted the PS5 Pro to do well, and if so, who's to say that logic doesn't carry over to the PS6? Also, you might notice I didn't mention Xbox at all. Yeah. Okay, let's talk about game keycards. I am not as opinionated on this as most people on the internet are, but overall, obviously, I don't like them. If I could live in a world without them, that would be preferable, but that's like asking to live in a world where there's no Pokemon discourse, which is too much to ask for. You are essentially getting the worst of both worlds, because you need to be connected to the internet to install the game, and it installs to the console itself or your SD card, but you also have to put it in the console anytime you want to play it, even though there's quite literally nothing but fumes in there. And unfortunately, this is what a lot of third-party developers are doing on the Switch 2, because Nintendo doesn't offer a variety of cartridge sizes, and their 64GB cartridge is like $15 per cart. And some third-party developers are also citing issues with the game's performance when it's not running off of a micro SD express card. Okay. It's a facsimile of what a physical game is. And the worst part is, I think they think they're doing something good here by kind of giving a middle ground that satisfies both the developers and the players, but it really just satisfies no one. It's like the walking corpse of your grandma that they're dangling in front of you because, oh, you love your grandma, don't you? Well, here she is, just like you remember. And you're like, Nintendo, something's wrong with grandma. And to your surprise, because I can already hear you typing in the comments, yes, there are people who still don't have high-speed internet, and some of those same people might have a Switch 2. You don't know what people's circumstances are. When the Messenger 2 comes out and it's on a game keycard, I don't want my boy Wacko from Mr. Beast to have to wait 3 whole business days just to play it. That's not right. Justice for Wacko. The way I was going to wrap up this part of the video just changed a lot, because as I was editing this video, it's currently November 11th, 2025, there have been some developments that have kind of thrown a curveball into what I was talking about. So I want to start by saying the biggest saving grace of game keycards is the fact that they were only for third-party games, which is still stupid, right? I still don't agree with it, and I think the solution is that Nintendo just makes more carts. Nintendo just makes a higher variety of cartridges, because yeah, they're charging $15 per cartridge for a 64GB cartridge that third-party developers don't want to pay for, which is understandable. And I imagine it's already hard enough dealing with Nintendo as a third-party developer because the cartridges are proprietary to begin with. You know, they're not a disc, so they're more complicated to work with. So it's understandable that so many companies are buying into this. Nintendo's kind of forced their hand in a way. But now that argument isn't as valid because they're succumbing to problems that they themselves have created. Because today, Nintendo uploaded a video on their YouTube channel using game keycards on Nintendo Switch 2. The title doesn't matter. What happens is right there in the thumbnail, you see Pokemon Pokopia as a game keycard, and they illustrate this game as a game keycard throughout the entirety of the video. And this is complicated, right? Because, you know, the Pokemon Company is a complicated entity, you know, made up of Nintendo, Game Freak, and creatures. But at the end of the day, this game is published by Nintendo. It just raises concerns about the future of game keycards and physical games and preservation. Because if Nintendo and the Pokemon Company are doing this now for this game, what's to stop them from doing the same thing for Gen 10 of Pokemon, right? Which will surely come out next year. And if they do, that would single-handedly be the point of no return. Because if those games did anywhere near as well as Scarlet and Violet or Sword and Shield, then that would just solidify game keycards as a viable solution in Nintendo's eyes. Because people would buy it, right? I hate to say it because I'm a Pokemon fan too, but people will eat it up. If it's a new Pokemon game, a new generation, and they want it, they will go buy it and they don't care. No one, like, so many people don't care about it, you know? And that's fine. I understand that the people that actually care about this are not a large group of people. We're just a vocal minority who are attached to physical games. If you're not invested in this, that's fine. I don't care. But if you are at all invested in physical video games, then you owe it to yourself to support them as much as possible. I said earlier that I wasn't very passionate about the idea of video game preservation. And like I said, what I meant by that was that people dumb it down to a degree that it really isn't, because preservation involves so much more than just the game. It involves everything else that comes with the game, all of the different aspects that make the physical game special. That's why physical preservation is a completely separate thing from just preservation, you know? But the more stuff that comes out of this with the game keycards, and the longer I spent working on this video, the more I started to realize, no, I'm pretty pissed off, and I am passionate about preservation. And I don't want to see this continue. It's not something I've been vocal about because I just kept my head down, stuck to myself, and tried to see the positives, right? Tried to see some sort of beacon of hope, right? But I'm finally feeling the emotions that everyone else started feeling months ago when game keycards were first implemented. And it sucks. It really sucks. So what do? I don't really know, but I think all we can do is to continue buying physical games, to continue showing our support. If a game releases on Switch 2 and it's on the actual cartridge, it's not a game keycard, and it's maybe something you were on the fence about before, but now you see it's physical, do it, buy it, like absolutely, show your support. Because I know one person doesn't make a difference, one sales figure doesn't make a difference, but I'd like to think if enough people came together, we could make some sort of difference. That's just my hopeless optimism probably, but who knows? I don't want to leave this on a somber note, so I want to bring something to your attention here. I think if you are a fan of physical games, and more than that, indie games, you need to be supporting Fangamer. Something I didn't really touch on in this video is indie games, because they don't often have the luxury of getting physical releases, and that's where Fangamer comes in. They've partnered with several different indie developers to publish physical versions of their games, along with the merch, of course, which is what they're most known for. And this is honestly the perfect example of what I want to see in the games industry. This is a company that clearly loves video games, and they want to sell things that people want to buy, and clearly they have an affinity for physical games, because you gotta think. It's a lot of effort to go through this process for each and every one of these games. You don't do that unless you're passionate. So yeah, I highly recommend supporting Fangamer if you want to show any love at all for physical games in 2025, or even if you just want some kick-ass merch. I know this sounds like a sponsored segment. It's genuinely not. I just really love this company and want to make sure they get the recognition they deserve. Furthermore, if you're less so interested in the cultural aspects of physical games I discussed in this video, and you're more focused on the ownership and longevity aspects of owning a game, then you should totally be buying games on GOG. Their digital storefront is really good because, for one, a lot of old games that need to be preserved are coming to GOG first and foremost, and second of all, when you purchase a game through them, it comes with an offline installer, so you don't have to ever worry about losing access to this game. More than any other digital storefront, you own this game, which means I'm stuck with Silent Hill 4: The Room for life.
God damn it.
No! Oh my god!
What is he doing?
Тройка.